employees need to see leaders learning. You know, we employees are looking, they're always watching, right? When they're picking up on cues and they're taking away messages. And when leaders are demonstrating what it looks like to push the envelope, to challenge themselves, to make some mistakes and be authentic and vulnerable about it and share the lessons you learned. When leaders are doing that, suddenly it makes sense for employees to do it too. And then it's just like that virtuous cycle.
Hello to you. It's Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I am, as always, your host, Russell Lawlicker. Thank you so much for joining me. Always enjoy your time. Always enjoy your space. Always enjoy you just having it to spend with me. It means a lot. What should I say about development? Oh my goodness. It's this lingering thing in the workplace. It is this thing that we're constantly supposed to have, but don't always get. It's not always well defined. It seems ad hoc sometimes. There doesn't seem to be these plans. And other times there is, and it seems so stringent. It's like, what if I don't want to go down that path? Development is such an odd thing, organization, industry to industry, organization to organization. It's our relationship to development. I think that we need to spend a lot more time having. What does it mean? What is our relationship with it as leaders, for ourselves, for our teams, for our organizations, for our cultures? How do we approach development? What's the mindset we should? I've got so many questions about development, but I agree with our guest today in that it's a relationship that we should have with development. And what does that look like? Really enjoyed this episode. Loved talking to Julie. She knows her stuff. She is brilliant. I will say that the audio was not great on this episode. It's one of those ones where you have a great conversation. It's all recorded, sounds great. And then you go back into it to do editing and you're like, damn it. That did not sound as great as I was hoping it would sound. I don't know where the problem lies, but it was so good. I didn't want to do anything with it other than just release it as it is. I hope you have patience a bit. It's not horrible, but it's not as great as our usual episodes are. That takes nothing away from our guest. She is phenomenal and has some amazing bits of information, tactics, thinking that we really should embrace as leaders. So I'm going to let her do that. And I'd like to introduce you to Julie Winkle Giulioni. Hold on. And on the show today, we have Julie Winkle Giulioni. And here's why she is, wait for it, awesome. She's a keynote speaker, leadership trainer, and best-selling author. Her books include Promotions Are So Yesterday, Redefine Career Development, Help Employees Thrive. And as the co-author of the international bestseller, Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go, Career Conversations Organizations Need and Employees Want. Translated into 7 languages, don't you know? She's been named among Inc.'s 100 leadership speakers, and she's a leadership development consultant for the Global Good Fund, which coaches nonprofit leaders and social entrepreneurs committed to positive social change. One more thing she can add to the biography, she's on Relationships at Work. Nice to meet you, Julie.
And that is going to the top of the biography.
Even alphabetically, that's not true, but I appreciate that immensely. Thank you. Excited to talk to you today. We're talking development. I'm just saying development because that's actually a question I want to get into a little bit of how we clarify development. But before we get into any of that, the first question I ask all of my guests, which I have to ask you as well, Julie, what's your best or worst employee experience?
I love this question because I love talking about my very first employment experience back when I was 16 years old, wet behind the ears. I had an assistant store manager at Montgomery Ward who was my boss. At the time, I was teaching modeling and charm to children. And, I haven't really grown up much, have I? I'm still kind of talking about how we all get along. Anyway, I love this work. I kind of mastered the classes. We were making money. I kind of had it all done, and I was starting to get bored. So I went to my boss and said, Mr. Kelsey, I'm kind of bored. I want to keep doing this. Don't get me wrong, but I need a little bit more. And what I'd really like to do is play in the space of promotion, and marketing, and see what we could do to draw more customers in. And his default was yes. You don't get any budget. You don't get any more support, but go for it. Yeah, I'm here. I will personally support you in doing this. I was thrilled. Again, I'm a kid in a candy shop getting to play with and work with, collaborate with these other department heads to figure out how I can support their efforts. I had my friends and my parents dress up in costumes at Halloween and give out candy to customers. It didn't cost him a thing. And what he got in exchange for that was utterly priceless. What I got in exchange for that was priceless. I remember when I went to him and I said, I have this idea. I'd like to bring the circus to town. And if we have the circus in the parking lot, imagine the people coming in. Well, I can tell you, you can imagine the consequences of having elephants in a parking lot. I'm just going to leave it at that. I won't say it anymore. But he was there, helped me understand how to deal with those consequences, brought in the extra resources. I learned so much. They made more money. And the engagement, the expectation then that I had for the workplace was incredibly high. I really owe my career to Mr. Kelsey back then.
I always find this question super interesting because besides the fact that these stories are so interesting and impactful, but also because we seem to have to go so far back for them, especially the good ones. Bad ones, I would disagree. Bad ones are usually go back far too, but they seem to be more trauma related that people have carried. But when you go back that far to this freedom and this, sure, do what you want. We're not giving you any more money, but that freedom is phenomenal. But then now you're looking for it in every job you have after the fact. What did you bring with you from that as a leader in your own career?
Oh, I think that experience has informed every piece of work that I've done since. Having the visceral experience of a leader say, yes, see something in me, a capacity that maybe I didn't yet see, to have the support. And frankly, there's a lot to be learned from not having resources. You got to get scrappy and figure out how to do stuff with nothing. And so all of that, I think, has informed how I think about development. So frequently managers, leaders, when they think about development, they think about sending somebody to a course. They think about the conference or the workshop, which are all great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I make my living doing that stuff. But what I learned right from the get go is that there is growth that's available for literally no dollars whatsoever right there in the workflow. When you've got, to the point of your podcast, when you've got a development relationship forged between a manager and an employee.
Hey, if you're enjoying the insights from our guests, you'll love our Raw Notes newsletter. It's packed with guest takeaways, the resources that inspire them, and my own tips on how we as leaders can be better humans for the humans that we're responsible for. Go to relationshipsatworkshow.com and subscribe now and help the workplace be more human. I love that you're driving us right to where we're talking about, and I need to define something. And I love that you actually have redefine in the title of your books. It makes it a lot easier for me to segue into this. We talk about development, and I've heard it used so much and so broadly, but I'm curious as to what your definition of development is when it comes to the workplace. How would you define it?
I think it's a moving target, to be honest, Russell. In the past, we sorted development into these artificial categories, right? We had personal development, and we had professional development, and we had career development, we had technical development, and we parsed it all out and decided, that the personal development was all about the relationships and the soft stuff, which we know is the hardest, and so on. And as the workplace has changed, as the workforce has changed, those lines, those buckets, the lines of demarcation are real blurry today. When we're bringing our whole person to the workplace, and during COVID, when we brought our workforce into our homes to see our whole person and our whole lives, those lines, they just don't make sense anymore. So from my perspective, what development is about It's about the growth that's meaningful to someone at any point in their careers. And it might be more interpersonal. It might be that at certain points in my career, I need to be really doubling down on empathy and compassion and communication. And then there are other times when it's more of a technical bent, other times when yeah, but it's all about growth, and it's all seen through the lens of what is the employee interested in? What do they want from this season of their career or work life?
I love that you talked about the blurred lines. I've certainly learned in the last couple of years, every time we talk about leadership development, I'm like, but that's just about making you a better person. That it doesn't matter if you turn on a computer or walk into a building. You should have more empathetic, forward, compassionate, listening skills. I mean, these things should not be a light switch you just turn on and off when you walk into work. And yet, to your point, we differentiate career leadership, career development, sorry, leadership development, professional development, personal development. Drives me nuts. It's really all the same thing.
It totally is. If we're going to be integrated, authentic leaders in the workplace.
So, what is the connective tissue between development and relationship with others in the workplace? When we chatted earlier, before we were preparing for this show, you had talked about development is a relationship. Could you explain that?
Yeah, I think that I was going to, my lead into the answer was going to be, I don't think there is any connective tissue because I think they're one and the same. You can't grow and develop and realize your potential in the absence of supportive relationships around you. Learning, growth, development, it is risky business. Stepping out into the unknown, doing what you're not already good at, experimenting, it can yield unintended consequences and mistakes and failures and whatnot. People aren't going to do that, especially in today's workplace. The tolerance for that kind of thing is so slim. People aren't going to take those kinds of risks to learn if they don't feel like they have a supportive relationship behind them. If their boss, if their team doesn't have their back, growth just isn't going to happen. So I really think that the only way people grow is when that relationship exists. And leaders have to earn the right, to engage like that with folks. I mean, this is the most intimate way a leader engages with an employee. When you're talking about growth, you're talking about hopes and dreams and aspirations and fears. I mean, that is deep stuff. And you got to earn the right to do that by building the relationship, investing in the relationship, building the kind of trust that inspires growth.
So, why do so many organizations get this wrong? I remember a story. Well, I don't remember a story. I was in the story. I was at a conference. I was in the hallway and I was listening to this HR. It was a huge HR conference. And there was this obvious HR professional. She was calling back to work. And she's like, this is my tribe. These are my people. I love what I'm learning. And I have no idea what to do with any of this when I go back. So what had basically I'm hearing is leadership, I'm using air quotes, leadership had done a checkbox exercise going, okay, we need to do development. Okay, go to that conference. We're not going to talk to you when you get back. We don't care what you learned, but we can say we developed our staff. So where's that disconnect?
I think you've really kind of nailed it. The disconnect is that we're treating development as a series of activities and tasks versus as that relationship, right? So if we're thinking about growth as a relationship, then yeah, we see this person who's going to benefit from this conference. And we have a conversation with that person and say, here's the potential I see in you. Here may be some gaps that would really serve you to look at. And here's this conference. Would you be interested? These are the goals that you might want to think about, but you look at the brochure, come back, let's talk about what you want to get out of it. So there's a game plan going in. And then a development relationship means that person comes back and says, wow, this was awesome. Here's what I've learned. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how you can hold me accountable. Here's the support that I need. But it becomes, it's that relationship between the two. And I don't want to, I'm overblowing that it has to be the manager and the employee, because increasingly with, larger and larger spans of control, with a distributed workforce, sometimes it's not the manager who's going to be your partner in crime when it comes to growth. It can be your team just as easily, but it's that partnership that extends it from I'm going through the motions to I am absorbing information and content and insights and wisdom that I can then use. And that happens in relationship with.
Do you think and I call this a blind spot in leadership, do you think it's the too busy problem that seems to get in the way of us being able to do this properly?
If I had a nickel for every time I heard that one, I would be a wealthy woman. Yeah. In fact, when my co-author Bev Kay and I wrote Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go originally, like 13 years ago now, we did some research to figure out because we knew that development was a key driver of engagement. It just delivers so much goodness. And we knew that employees were consistently saying, not getting it. And we had to reconcile, square that. So we did some research to figure out what was getting in the way. And what we ultimately, it wasn't excuses or reasons. We ultimately framed it as immobilizing myths because there's a kernel of something in it, but not enough to actually create this immobilization. But the number one immobilizing myth was no time. 3 to 1. That's what leaders came back to us and said, I'd love to do it. It's all good, but I don't have the time. And I think this gets back to what we were just talking about. If we continue to think of career development as a task, as a to-do, as something that goes on the list that needs to be checked off, it either gets checked off in that real mechanical way that we all love to do, so we get it off our plates, or it just keeps moving down the list and we don't get around to it. When we help leaders reframe development in terms of a relationship, that it's not that 2 hour, once a year summit you have with somebody off in the corner to create this laundry list of things they're going to do that you might or might not ever look at again until next year this time. When we help them understand that it's the small moments, that it's the following up on that conference, that it's the asking, what did you learn this week? When we help them understand that it's supporting somebody when they make a mistake, rather than berating them, helping them unpack it and figure out where the lessons lie for growth and future improvement. Those are small things that people can fit in. Who doesn't have time for a 3-minute conversation, especially when it's going to deliver the kind of engagement, retention, all the other things that we want? So that's really the key, is helping leaders realize this isn't a to-do. This is a to-be. This is how I show up with my people day in and day out.
I think what a lot of leaders don't seem to understand is if they can't first manage their time, they can't even be leaders because they're not able to lead their team. So I'm like, first you need to manage your time, which is a resource, and then you can be a leader. But leaders who have no time for their teams aren't actually leading anything other than following an Outlook calendar. So we call them leaders, but they're not even able to be leaders in those situations because they're not, to your point, helping them grow, and then they get to watch them go. I knew I was going to squeak that title in there somewhere.
Well done, sir. Well done.
So let's look inside ourselves a bit on how we can, as leaders, be better at this. So, for instance, a leader's own development journey, because as much as it is about helping others, we also seem to miss is leaders are also employees. We also have journeys and learning development that we need. So how does our own leadership learning development journey, how does that support the development of others?
Yeah. Well, and I hate overused metaphor, but this is begging for the oxygen mask metaphor. When we're on the planes, we're invited to put the mask on ourselves before we can help others. Because if we're unconscious, we're not going to be of much use to that kid sitting next to us. And I think a lot of managers are developmentally unconscious. They haven't been attending to their growth. Maybe they didn't have great leaders modeling this and supporting them. And so it's hard when your own, cup is depleted to be able to pour anything into somebody else's. And so for a leader, simply learning, growing yourself puts you in a place where you're better able, where you feel more generous, toward others when it comes to that. But I think the other thing that's really important is employees need to see leaders learning. We employees are looking, they're always watching, right? And they're picking up on cues and they're taking away messages. And when leaders are demonstrating what it looks like to push the envelope, to challenge themselves, to make some mistakes and be authentic and vulnerable about it and share the lessons that are learned. When leaders are doing that, suddenly it makes sense for employees to do it too. And then it's just like that virtuous cycle. So now the next generation of leaders are seeing this done well. They're going to naturally do it to others, and they tell a friend, and on it goes.
And it creates such a sense of relatability too, because there's so many leaders that come in thinking they have to have all the answers. They got the job because they know it better than anybody else. And then we see all these, team members going, well, it's a facade. You can't know everything. So for you to also be on your learning journey, you're like, oh, you're not to say you're one of us, but you are somebody that I could aspire to work the career up to. Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. And you've got more visibility to what that career looks like. So frequently employees see somebody at the director or the VP level and they just assume that it was this straight line, easy ascent. And the truth is, for most people, it's one step forward, two steps back, falling down the hill, climbing up again. And when leaders are authentic about it, it also right sizes employee expectations for what careers can look like, that it's not just that easy climb up the ladder.
One of the best executive speakers I ever saw was, for the first time, extremely introverted. I've told this story before on the podcast. Extremely introverted, extremely not comfortable public speaking. But she went out in front of everybody and then talked about every job she'd never gotten and every job she'd wanted, but also didn't have the skills and had to continue doing development to get the career path she wanted. It was the first executive in the history of that organization that had admitted they hadn't got a job. Everybody else was like, I wanted that job, I got that job. I wanted that job, I got that job. It was so unrealistic and so, patronizing and narcissistic, to be blunt. But the amount of people that scurried up to her at the end of the talk to, thank you, can you help me? I need mentorship. Where should I go to learn? It was eye-opening at the relationship she was building right before your very eyes.
Exactly. Well, vulnerability, transparency. That's the currency of relationships, isn't it?
You mention in your books about the multidimensional career framework, which is these 7 C's. Let's go. Contribution, competence, connection, confidence, challenge, contentment, and choice. I did not do that from memory. I had to write that down. All really impactful. All really interesting and really impactful. But I was super curious, as somebody ourselves as a leader on our leadership journey, how does this understanding of a multi-dimensional career framework help us basically in preparing to help others?
Yeah, yeah. And so the multidimensional career framework is something that I've developed over 12 or 15 years now of field research. Um, and what it attempts to do, it goes back, I know how you like your definitions. It goes back to redefining career development because for so many of us, it's been defined very narrowly as that next step up the ladder. That's actually the 8th C. It's climb, because that's how we used to think about it. And so if that's how you define career development, very few people are going to be happy. Very few people are going to feel like they're growing. And that's the problem that we had to date. And so the research that I found that there were actually those other 7 C's that people really hunger for, that people really want, that represent ways that we can engage with our work and grow right within the role we currently have. And so, for instance, our research, I think we're, 25,000 or so folks in our database now. What we find is that the dimension of greatest interest to people is actually contribution. People want to make a difference. They want to live on purpose. They want to be of service. They want to leave, things better. And I think about my first situation, my first work opportunity with Mr. Kelsey. I wanted to make a bigger impact there. It didn't cost him anything to enable and empower me to do that. And in the process, my engagement shot up. I learned so darn much. And to be honest with you, I stayed at that job so much longer than I would have if I had been stuck just teaching my classes. And so, same thing with some of the other dimensions. The second most interesting of the dimensions in our latest research from last year is competence. People are looking around the corner. They're seeing how fast things are changing and understand if they don't keep those skills up, they're going to be irrelevant pretty quickly. And so giving people opportunities to grow key skills, like that conference that the woman you described had gone to, but there are ways to do that in the workplace as well. Assignments, special assignments, special projects, cross-functional opportunities to contribute, where skills can be built right in the workflow. And that's the case with the other C's as well. So the key is, looking, as you said, first into ourselves. How do we want to engage? What's important to us right now? How do we want to learn is key. And then when we're leaders who have that kind of awareness, we can help to inspire similar awareness in others. And then again, further foment that kind of a development relationship.
Let's switch a bit from relationships with ourselves to relationship with others in the sense that I'm curious how often we even talk to our teams about this. Are we, because right now it seems like we talk maybe once a year as a check mark going, did you do the thing? Productivity review or whatever, and then we talk to them again in a year or, and maybe mention a couple classes, but it's not constant. It's not frequent. It's not organic, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Right, right. So the annual or twice a year sorts of conversations, I don't want to diminish those because those are important points in time. And they yield data for the organization that drives manpower planning, succession planning, and the like. So I don't want to diminish those, but I have not heard one employee ever say, my peak development experience was that meeting back in that corner in 1992. I mean, that's not where people are growing. They are growing organically in the workflow, and that's where those conversations need to happen. So in a lot of organizations, there's been a push toward distributing feedback, making sure that you're having more feedback conversations, maybe even replacing the annual performance review in lieu of these frequent feedback conversations, which sounds good depending upon how they're structured. So frequently, though, it's just the information. You did this well, you didn't. More frequently, it's you didn't do that well. And so it's the what, but without the so what. Okay, so the so what becomes what do we do with this that translates into growth? Leaders who can take those feedback conversations and then morph them or take that second step into the so what and then what? What are we going to do about it? That can be really powerful. Leaders who are doing, their weekly one-on-ones, who spend that first 5 minutes talking about what have you learned? What's challenging? What's interesting to you right now? And then get on with the business that needs to be done. Those are the leaders who are forging the relationship that builds the development. Those are also the leaders who end up with employees and teams who are highly engaged with the work and with their development. And then when you've got that kind of engagement, when you've got that kind of a leader, that just inspires a level of loyalty that builds a kind of retention that most organizations are looking for.
Want more from our conversations on the show? Subscribe to the Raw Notes newsletter. It's where I share top takeaways from our guests, the resources that fuel their success, and my personal insights on how we as leaders can be more human. And we need more human. Go to relationshipsatworkshow.com and sign up today to keep your leadership journey on the right path. and I know you're a fan of this as well. Curiosity seems to come up a lot for me as you're mentioning this of we need to ask questions. But it can't be, I mean, formulaic is great. It's a framework. It's a nice way of at least being able to refer back to your point, data points. But it also needs to be human. And I think curiosity comes in there a lot of like, listen to what your employees are saying. Maybe ask them, hey, have you encountered anybody that has a job you'd want one day? What are the things that you could be doing to get to that point? How has curiosity shown up in your research as a tenet of this?
It's huge. It is, I refer to curiosity as a gateway competency because it informs and elevates every other skill we might have. If you're in sales and you bring curiosity to it, you're going to understand the customer and be able to find that right product or service match. If you're in service and you bring curiosity to those conversations, you're going to be able to fix those problems and elevate the customer experience. And if you're a leader and you bring curiosity to those conversations, you're going to be able to unlock information that could go dormant, for decades, for a whole career for that matter. So curiosity to me is really key. And questions, are a perfect way to demonstrate that curiosity. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the approach that Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go takes is from a leadership standpoint, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have any of the answers. What you need is those great questions and the curiosity and the listening that goes along with that. So that, for instance, asking somebody so frequently, the formula, to use your expression, is where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Not a very curious question. And it's not a very helpful question because who knows what the workplace is going to look like in 3 to 5 years? Pick a job. AI might have, rendered that irrelevant by then. So the curious question is, what do you want to do? What kind of work do you want to do? What kinds of experiences do you want to cultivate? What kind of technology do you want to work with? What kind of customers do you want to work with? What do you want to achieve? Those kinds of really curious, deep questions unlock, insights that allow for the manager and the employee to co-create an experience in the here and now, rather than waiting, unless that new promotion or role or whatever makes itself available. I mean, so many times employees feel like they're in the waiting room. We can turn that waiting room into a really vibrant classroom where learning is infused in the day-to-day work. And so, maybe that prepares them for that ultimate promotion, or maybe it just keeps them really happy and engaged right where they are.
One of my biggest pet peeves is that question of where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? And I've encouraged even on my own show, I'm like, you should ask your leader where they see you in 3 to 5 years because they're the ones that know the industry. They're the ones that have the bigger lens than you do. So they should have a plan for you too. So I always,
Yeah,
I always find that
I
nuts.
I love that turning of the table. But even their answers, I really worry. The workplace, it is moving fast. I mean, when you think about what you would have said 3 to 5 years ago that you wanted to do today, I mean, who knows? It may not be there.
Jobs may not even exist in 3 to 5 years that suddenly pop up that are more than AI, that are such a big deal now. Yeah, absolutely. When we ask questions, I always ask this question, which is, what does success look like to you? I always find that to be an interesting
I
uh,
love that one.
barometer question. But that also, when that brings up for me, when we're talking about, I don't know why I did this, I'm trying to point to my head like I'm a smart person. Um, Diversity comes up for me because different people define success differently. And since we're talking about development, not promotions, others, depending on your cultural, socioeconomical, may have a different idea of what development success looks like. How do you tackle that in the conversations?
It's through conversation, isn't it? I mean, that's the bottom line because we're not even aware of what that diversity of success definition is until we start talking to people. So and the precursor to someone answering a question that's that deep. I mean, when you think about it, you are digging into somebody's heart and soul when you start asking them to define success. So the precursor, the prerequisite for that is trust and psychological safety. Managers, leaders who aren't investing in relationships are not going to get very authentic or meaningful responses to a question like that. And so it's sort of like, you start watering your plants, before they start to grow in anticipation of that. We need to be watering those relationships with trust building behavior so that when we get ready to have that conversation, we're going to have earned the right for someone to expose themselves at that kind of a level.
And making assumptions as to what people's, just because you have this job means you want this job next, can only get in the way. I've seen that happen so many times. Or people that aren't ambitious for those next jobs. They just want to be really good in the one they have. That I think gets in the way of a lot of leaders having these expectations of what a career path automatically should look like, because that's the career and that's the organization they work in. It drives me nuts.
That is really well said on two different fronts. One is leaders, in a really well meaning way, they will look at someone and they will see themselves. And then they will cultivate that career in their own image, whether that makes sense for the person or not. Again, really well meaning, but not necessarily aligned. And then you hit on the other thing is so frequently we are pushing people up artificially when they just want to really rock their current role. And when you push, you take a technical person who's not ready to move into management, and then they get there, it's like, I don't even like people. How did I get here? It's not a good fit. Then you risk losing a great technical contributor. So honoring what someone wants, what success looks like, the kind of relationship that they want with their work, is in the individual's best interest, but it's also really in the organization's best interest long term as well.
So that makes me think about one of the things I find that has broken leadership systemically is that we either from the top, I'm going to use the hierarchy that I hate, we're looking for bums in seats. We need people to fill these roles. Yeah, they're good enough. Like we need bodies. Meanwhile, there's people that are looking up the hierarchical chart going, I need to make more money. Even if I'm not prepared, even just the economy's horrible, I need to pay rent, I need to take on more responsibility, even if I'm not the right person, just to make that five, whatever more per hour. Development seems like the cure to this, but we have this friction still happening between the top and the bottom on this, what leadership is or is not. How is development, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it isn't the solution, but I feel like it is based on how we're talking right now, is how do you feel this fits into this?
Well, I think you bring up yet another C into our conversation. It's compensation, right? And the fact that leaders and organizations tend to make that next pay bump creates an artificial incentive for folks to, even if that's not the job that they want to do, that's how you take home more money for your family or whatnot. So we've got a lot of people chasing leadership roles who aren't necessarily interested in doing the work of leadership, but need to do that just for the kind of the Maslow's of the lower levels of need. And so, yeah, I think that development is part of that. And let me come back to that in a moment. I think the other thing is organizations, I am working with so many organizations where the folks in HR are working overtime to crack the code on this, to really figure out how do we decouple some of these, compensation and level issues. How do we reward people for building skills? How do we reward them for the contributions that they're making? So there's a lot of work that's being done within organizations to rethink that very fundamental issue. The other thing relative to comp is that there are studies out there that suggest that people would be willing to make less money for more autonomy. And so organizations can also, you've got that lever to use as well. But when it comes back to development, it really comes down to helping people get in touch with why they might want to move into a leadership role. I can't tell you how many people say, I really want to be a manager. And so I was like, great, that's wonderful. What do you look forward to doing in that role? And it's like years in the headlights. 'Cause they don't know. It's just been either the comp thing or just the kind of the habituation of climbing. I mean, it's just the assumption. So when you help people start to unpack, what do you want to do in that role? What does success look like in that role? At that point, then you've got all this rich fodder for, okay, how do we use today to develop you so that you are ready to really be effective when, as and if you hit that leadership role? So I think you're absolutely right. I think that development is absolutely a key to growing that leadership. The other thing that we know from the research that's out there is that people want growth so much that they will leave an organization where they're not growing to go to one where they will. And so I think that's the other, kind of lever that we have when it comes to the comp conversation.
It's that very popular saying, if you're not earning or learning, leave.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that.
Trust and impact are felt every day. And yet, organizations are much more interested in grand gestures, i.e., the annual conversation about professional development or the annual conference. What can leaders do every day? Not weekly, not monthly, but every day to sort of foster that development is almost a daily habit thing.
My advice would be pick a question and ask everybody. So what'd you learn today? Or what do you love about your job? Or what was the last really big challenge that you had to contend with? Or. I mean, these are not sophisticated, rocket science questions by any stretch. But when leaders start asking people and bringing that curiosity and that attentive listening to it, a 3-minute conversation around one of those questions, layered day after day, week after week, year after year, that demonstrates something so much more profound to folks than the 2-hour conversation off in the corner. That's a development relationship. That's authentic. That's really demonstration of care rather than a check the box sort of behavior. And that's where leaders build the trust and ultimately have the greatest impact, both on their people and then ultimately, on the business.
I think situational awareness is so key in those situations. Pay attention to what your teams are doing and look for things and be curious to your point of, well, you did that really well. Would this be a career path, or would you like further development in that thing? Or you've illustrated that you found this pretty challenging. Are there some development I can help? Like, as it happens, don't make a note and then wait for it for your weekly meeting or yearly meeting. Like, do it right there and have a conversation in the cubicle or in the wherever you are.
It's so powerful when we do that. And I am convinced that there are thousands of cues like that every day. It's not just when somebody's doing something well, it's when they're struggling. It's not just when they're super engaged, it's when they're disengaged. The beginning of a project, taking that moment to say, what do you intend to learn? And at the end of the project, how did that turn out? What did you learn? What are you taking away? What can you do today that you couldn't do yesterday? There are just so many small cues day in and day out that if we're cue sensitive, if we're curious about the environment around us, leaders can zoom in, find that moment, ask that question, and elevate the quality of the relationship and the growth that people can enjoy.
Of course, in leadership, we can only control what we can control. We can control the subculture in which we have influence over, which is our team, which is unfortunately sometimes in larger cultures that have very different points of view, that might very much have a promotion focus, not a development focus. So I get that we have to model the behavior, and I get that we have to focus on our teams and help with their development. Is there anything we can do to influence up, influence out, when it comes to the larger organization who may not be getting this, who may not be embracing that development is not a fancy word in front of it, it is just development?
Yeah, yeah. I honestly believe that leaders have so much power. not just to model what good looks like for their teams, but to model what good looks like upward in the organization. When a leader is really demonstrating these behaviors, when their teams are thriving, word gets out. Executives want to know what's going on over there in Russell's corner of the organization because they want more of that. And so, as leaders, as we feel like our development efforts are yielding, being able to share that narrative upward is really key. Because so frequently it's like, oh yeah, yeah, it was just a team. We've got a great team. But to say, no, you know what? Every day I'm talking with people. We've got development plans in place. Every one of my employees is working on XYZ, whatever it might be. That is why we were able to deliver those results. That starts to help executives understand what really are the levers of success. And when they realize that what you're doing is not costing the organization. In fact, in many cases, it's actually adding to the bottom line because people are taking on work that needs to be done in service of their own growth and it's getting done for the business. At that point, it's kind of a no-brainer.
I retained a team, same team for 12 years. And one of the pieces was that development, completely to your talking about. And the funny thing is also to your point, what everybody saw was the result. Not how the sausage was made. They saw the result, which was high performing, high retention, they see the result of it and then they start asking questions. But that's at the executive level, they start asking questions. At the team level, at the employee level, I had others constantly going, so when are you hiring? So when are you hiring? So when are you hiring? I want to leave. When are you hiring? Because my team doesn't do this. When are you hiring? And I'm like, my team doesn't leave. So never.
What I love about that, Michael, is so frequently managers are afraid. I develop my people, they leave, then I've got this hole, I have to start all over again. And of course, that, except on your teams, that's going to happen for others. But you really demonstrated that a great developer is a talent magnet. When you have a reputation for developing people, if you end up with an opening, you're going to have a whole slew of folks from which to choose to fill that.
I think one of the biggest challenges, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is that a lot of organizations do not look at it as a journey. They look at it as an onboarding exercise, and then I'll see you when you leave. That's it. As opposed to you start your first impression, which is the application process, which is a whole other conversation. Then there's the onboarding. Then there's these thrive interviews. I call them thrive, not stay interviews because I want people to thrive. I don't want them just to stick around.
Oh, I love it.
And then they exit. Like there is a arc to this. And development is the DNA of that. That is did we deliver what we promised at onboarding? Are we continuing that journey? Are you growing? And then checking back until they leave when you go, did we deliver what we promised when we hired you 10, 15, 3 weeks ago? But we see it as these moments in time. And I think we can't look at relationships that way. So why do we look at career development that way? It breaks my heart.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense because we have deconstructed the employee experience into these different categories. We have specialists in the organization who attend to each of them. And that's why the leader is so key because the leader is that thread of continuity. The leader is the one who connects these different points on the journey and keeps it real and going deeper on the development angle.
It's holistic. And I think, yeah, it's absolutely holistic. In your research and in your interviews and in your work yourself, have you seen that light bulb go? Like, how have you seen that light bulb go off? Where people are looking at going, oh, right, this is just an ongoing, never-ending journey. This is not just another rung in the ladder.
Yeah. I think there are a couple of things that happen that kind of make me smile when it comes to this question. I'll frequently just do the math for them. Would you rather take 2 hours, 120 minutes once a year, or 10 minutes a month? 5 minutes a week, a moment a day. You just start doing the math, and suddenly people say, oh my gosh, absolutely. Give me a minute a day, any day of the week. And so they start to see the value of deconstructing development into this kind of ongoing relationship. I do an exercise in my workshops typically where I'll pair people up. They have a whole bunch of questions. They get to choose which question they want to ask of each other. We say, we're going to have a development conversation here. Here's the kicker, 90 seconds. And I hit the stopwatch. They talk, switch, ask their question, the other one answers. When people go through this exercise and realize that with a great question, a curious mindset, the willingness to listen, that you can do development in 90 seconds. You can really, ask them how would you describe those conversations? Insightful, fun, engaging, deep. 90 seconds. Who doesn't have 90 seconds to drive a development conversation and a development relationship?
So I want to wrap it up with a final question, and maybe you just answered it, but I'm super curious as to what do you think. So somebody's listened to this. You've inspired the hell out of them, Julie. They're like, yes, development. This is what we should be doing. And they want to dip their toe in the water tomorrow. They want to start on the right foot. What would you recommend they do to just take that first little nudge in the right direction of building development and relationships with their teams?
I think the easiest thing that you could do as a leader is start asking people, so what did you learn last week? Just start there. The wisdom, the insight, the intel that you're going to get from that is going to be enormous, beyond what you might expect in terms of the business side of it. But this is where you start to get in touch with where people are coming from and where the opportunities lie relative to development. So if you just start asking that question, then you're going to get in the habit of asking a question. You can ask a couple of different ones. And over time, before you know it, you're going to have earned the right to develop somebody.
Ending it on curiosity. That is Julie Winkle Giulioni. She is a keynote speaker, leadership trainer, and best-selling author. 2 books that need to be in your library. Promotions Are So Yesterday, Redefine Career Development, Help Employees Thrive, and Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. Career Conversations Organizations Need, Employees Want. Thank you so much for being here, Julie.
Oh, Russell, thank you.
Thank you so much to Julie. Thank you so much to you. Thanks for me. I spent a lot of time putting this together. But anyway, thank you so much for spending your time with us. That'll do it for another Relationships at Work podcast episode. This is the Leadership Podcast, helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter already, it's a good thing. It's free. And it's such an amazing compliment to the show. Just go on our LinkedIn page. Relationships at Work has their own company page. And I put a newsletter out through there. I share it through my personal account too. I'd love to hear from you. Please reach out on LinkedIn. I like to spend most of my time over there, to be completely honest with you. If you're more of an email person, which I know a lot of our subscribers are, just go to relationshipsatworkshow.com. At the top, you can sign up for free. It'll be in your inbox weekly. They're just sort of thoughts, mindset shifts for the weeks ahead. They also inspire some of my solo episodes, maybe a few months, maybe a few weeks later, but they're certainly ones I like to embrace and little nuggets I think that are really worth paying attention to as leaders as we go down our own journeys. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to put a bow on it. I'm going to leave you. And I look forward to talking to you very, very soon. Take care.